Hey guys, tonight we slip through a misty veil of frankincense and crushed rose petals, into a time when fragrance wasn't just vanity, it was power. You're standing barefoot on cool marble floors, the sun slicing through sheer linen drapes. Around you, steam curls from perfumed bathwater, and the air hums with oil, flour, and something ancient. Welcome to Cleopatra's world. This is no ordinary pampering. You watch as servants decant thick, golden myrrh into ivory basins. An older woman, sharp-eyed, with hands stained by crushed herbs, dabs a slick balm beneath Cleopatra's collarbone. It's not for moisture. It's a weapon. You're not exactly cleared to be here. But you linger in the shadows anyway, watching the young queen adjust her gold serpent bracelet. Her eyes flick to the mirror, then past it. She knows you're watching. Always did. Now, reality check. If you think ancient perfume was just rubbing petals on your wrists, you might want to sit down. These people used crocodile dung for sunscreen, burned precious incense for hours, and crushed hundreds of flowers just to scent one goblet of oil. And if you thought medieval wars over spices were petty, wait until you hear how a bottle of perfume almost took down 2 empires. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from, country, city, or just under 4 blankets with the cat. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge out of the royal bathhouse, nostrils full of rose oil and sandalwood smoke. It's Alexandria, around 51 BCE. The scent lingers on your clothes long after the queen disappears behind a carved cedar screen. And you're not alone in noticing it. Cleopatra VII Theophilopator is only 17, and already she's developed an obsession with olfactory alchemy. Not for bathing, not for beauty, for influence. In the back corridors of the palace, behind the lavish reception halls and beneath the frescoed ceilings, she's built something between a lab and a garden of temptation. Shelves crammed with tiny clay jars. Copper distillers whistling quietly over embers. Garlands of dried herbs dangling like trophies. The mixture you smell on her skin today? That's not just perfume. That's strategy. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra learned her tricks from Egyptian priests or Hellenistic botanists, but one thing's clear, she knew the power of scent to mess with the human brain. And you? You're the fly on the wall as she begins to tinker. Late at night, after the court retires, you slip back into the perfumery. There's no password. Just the smell. Burnt cinnamon bark, date palm resin, and something sharp, maybe spikenard? A eunuch nods at you, not bothering to ask who you are. A low table is scattered with papyri. You glance over one and nearly sneeze at the powdered clove dust on its edge. It's a formula. Ratios, temperature notes, and something scribbled in Greek for Dionysian appeal. You hope that doesn't mean what you think it means. Here, Cleopatra isn't just experimenting with smell. She's constructing a kind of scent-based language. Some blends soothe, others provoke. One recipe contains both cedar and rue, known to attract and repel, respectively. That's not a mistake. That's a message. You peek behind a curtain and catch her studying a tray of small flasks. Each is labeled with a symbol, a crescent moon, a falcon, a dagger, a broken heart. And each, presumably, with a smell to match. One is missing. A small alabaster vial, previously nestled in velvet. You know where it went, on her skin. Earlier today. A breeze picks up from the open window. Outside, Alexandria buzzes with the chaos of markets and politics. Inside, you realize this little vial may one day be more dangerous than Cleopatra's infamous ASP. You sniff again, and try to remember every note. Just in case. You press deeper into the palace's guts, ducking under tapestry-covered archways until the perfumery's aroma fades into something colder, stone, smoke, and a hint of something acrid. You're in a forgotten annex now, lit by flickering oil lamps, smelling faintly of old scrolls and even older ambitions. Welcome to Cleopatra's other lab. It's not on any official blueprint. This place doesn't welcome decorative urns or silk cushions. Instead, iron instruments glint on the shelves. Pestles crusted with dried paste. Rows of clay bowls, some still steaming with unnamed experiments. One corner is roped off by palm fronds, and you're pretty sure that's to keep the animals, maybe jackals, from sniffing around. 2 figures hover over a distillation vat. One is Cleopatra herself, robed in linen but barefoot, Her anklet bells faint as breath. The other is an older man with ink-stained hands, possibly a former temple priest, now red-assed with chemistry. They're not just mixing sin here. They're refining influence. She leans forward and sniffs. Too heavy, she murmurs, wrinkling her nose. He'll think I'm hiding something. It's clear she's not just concocting perfumes, she's testing psychological profiles. This blend is for a Roman emissary. That blend for a Syrian merchant. She knows which men are drawn to jasmine, which prefer musk, which crumble before a whiff of lotus and honey. You wonder if anyone's ever gotten close to her without being chemically charmed first. A papyrus flutters off a table. You snag it, then hesitate. It's covered in tiny symbols, far more complex than any simple perfume recipe. There's mention of limbic memory and second exposure reactions. It reads more like a neurolab report than something from 51 BCE. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra had access to proto-scientific studies from Alexandria's now destroyed library, but this looks suspiciously advanced. Then, a smaller scroll, a list of scents and their emotional triggers. Grief, marjoram. Trust, cedarwood. Lust, civet. Power, cassia. You raise an eyebrow. That last one, cassia, was worth its weight in silver. Roman elites hoarded it for funerals and temples. Cleopatra's using it like bait. In a far corner sits a sealed chest. You kneel beside it, prying gently, and catch a sharp scent, bitter almond. Poison. Not all experiments end in love letters. A bronze mirror leans against the wall. You glimpse yourself, tousled, wide-eyed, glowing in the low amber light. And behind you, shelves of unmarked vials. Some sparkle faintly. Some pulse, like they're warm. One is labeled simply, Project Eros. You pull it down. Open it. It smells impossible. Like moonlit gardens and ocean storms. And heartbreak. You're not even sure how a smell could contain heartbreak. But this one does. You cap it quickly. Something about this place is starting to feel bigger than perfume. Bigger than Cleopatra, even. Outside, the day's changing. Chariots grind past the courtyard. Distant shouting echoes from the docks. You remember where you were, Alexandria, jewel of Egypt, still tense after Ptolemy's advisors tried to exile Cleopatra. But while the city writhes in politics, the queen is deep in her lab, crafting drops of war disguised as pleasure. Someone passes behind you, dropping a sack of ingredients, labdanum, turpentine, powdered benzoin. You recognize a few. Others are mysterious. From India? The Horn of Africa? Cleopatra's reach spans far beyond Egypt's borders. She tests a new blend on her wrist. Waits. Then smiles, not at the scent, but at the memory it stirs. You wonder whose. Do you smell it? She asks aloud, though she's not looking at you. He'll think of me when he smells it again. Weeks from now. Months. On another woman. It's not magic. It's design. Cleopatra's perfume isn't just meant to lure, it's meant to haunt. You step back, past the boiling copper, the parchment-littered desks, the heavy air of calculation. The queen's footsteps echo down the corridor, fading like the last notes of a melody you'll never fully understand. But you've seen enough to know, this is no hobby. This lab is ground zero for something Egypt's enemies aren't even aware exists yet. A war of memory, of association, of identity, bottled in oil and shadow. And you're not sure which will explode first, the formula or the feelings. You wake to the crunch of sand under camels' feet and the sting of cardamom on the breeze. You're in the Wadi Hammamet now, Egypt's ancient trade artery, and your robe clings with sweat as you follow a spice caravan across the bone-dry hills. Gold glints on the horizon, but no one's digging for treasure here. They're digging for perfume. The queen has sent you, well, technically, she sent someone else, but you've managed to tag along, to secure key ingredients for a new blend. Not oils this time, but resins. Frankincense. Myrrh. Storax. Things that smell like time itself. You kneel beside a trader scraping golden sap off the bark of a boswellia tree. It hardens into small, glistening tears. He sniffs one proudly, then pockets it as though it were a jewel. You think of Cleopatra, far behind you, waiting for these very tears to melt in her crucibles. But these aren't just purchases. They're pawns. The regions that produce these sacred aromatics, Arabia, Nubia, Punt, aren't exactly cozy with Rome. Cleopatra knows this. So do the traders. Scent is just the front. The real trade is influence. A man offers you a satchel of resin-stuffed scrolls. To Her Majesty, he says in Greek, but his eyes say more. Hidden inside are political updates, troop movements, and marriage proposals. All coated in botanical ink. One scroll smells unmistakably like vetiver. Cleopatra's agents will know what that means. It's a warning. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra used her scent network as a diplomatic tool or a spy ring. You're watching it unfold and still can't tell the difference. Either way, she's turning frankincense into foreign policy. A fringe theory suggests she even trains certain priests to craft incense that induce trust, or nausea, depending on who is inhaling. You try not to breathe too deeply. That evening, campfires crackle. The air is thick with perfume smoke. You huddle near a merchant who swears Cleopatra once infused her sails with perfume so strong it wafted into ports before her ships were seen. You chuckle. Sounds ridiculous. Except it's true. Plutarch later wrote that Antony knew she'd arrived in Tarsus not by her banners, but by her scent. A cloud of sweetness that rolled across the sea like a storm of roses. You watch the traders barter over bundles of herbs. You recognize some: cinnamon bark, cistus petals, blue lotus. Others are unknown, labeled only with odd pictographs. One pouch smells like honey left in the sun. Another reeks like rotting figs and wine, a base note, someone says. Everything has its purpose. The real twist? Rome wants it all too. Their upper crust has caught wind, literally, of Egypt's aromatic edge. You hear whispers of Roman perfumers paying triple for access to the Queen's blend, though no one's cracked the recipe. Yet, that's the danger. Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra knows this, too. She's already restricted access to her perfumers. Anyone caught selling recipes outside the palace disappears. Politely. Sometimes with a little vial of lavender slipped into their hand, as if to say, sweet dreams. You tuck your nose into your sleeve as a puff of charcoal smoke rises, laced with mint and death. Some blends were made for pleasure. Others weren't. One trader leans toward you and whispers, there's talk that Cleopatra sent perfume, not ambassadors, to soften Caesar. Another nods. She knows men's noses better than their minds. It's all theater, really. A jar of oil here, a flower there, and suddenly you're building alliances and making enemies across 3 continents. You return to the Queen's palace a week later, sunburned and bone-tired. The scent of the trade roads clings to your skin, frankincense, yes, but also salt, dust, danger. Cleopatra takes the pouch from your hand, sniffs once, and smiles like someone who's just won a very subtle battle. You can't help but notice she already smells like tomorrow's plan. You wake in a velvet-draped chamber with your head full of petals and smoke. The lingering scent is hypnotic, honeyed and earthy, sharp as clove, and you know you've been breathing in it all night. Cleopatra has changed the atmosphere again. Down the corridor, she's mid-experiment. This one isn't just a recipe. It's a performance. She sits on a throne of cushions, wearing a tunic so finely woven it catches the breeze like spun gold. At her feet, open jars, all exhaling delicate scents, bitter almond, crushed rose, black cumin, and the unmistakable syrupy base of labdanum. She dips a slender reed into a narrow-necked flask, dabs a dot behind her ear, another along her collarbone, and one more inside her wrist, where her pulse ticks like a quiet metronome. Then, she waits. You think this is about smelling nice? Try again. You're watching a queen build a mood. Outside, word arrives, a Roman envoy is coming. Not a senator. A mid-level official sent to check on Alexandria's situation. Read, someone Rome expects to gather intelligence and return unimpressed. And so, Cleopatra is preparing, not with speech, not with soldiers, but with scent. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's knowledge of perfumery was taught by priests or gleaned from Greek physicians. Either way, she's mastered the psychological layering of aroma. First note? Sweetness. Approachability. The second? Mystery. Then finally, after he's leaned a little too close and forgotten where he is, a trace of something animal, something raw. When the Roman arrives, you're posted behind the curtain, trying not to sneeze. He enters stiff, diplomatic, draped in a toga that smells like sea travel and stale ambition. But within minutes, his expression shifts. Eyes soften. Shoulders relax. He doesn't know it, but he's responding to Cleopatra's calculated blend, sweet orange blossom for nostalgia, myrrh to evoke reverence, and the faintest hint of civet to stir what shouldn't be stirred in a diplomatic setting. He talks. Too much. Reveals troop placements, trade grumbles, even gossip from Caesar's inner circle. He doesn't know why. He just feels good here. Safe. Important. Cleopatra listens, smiling, asking nothing directly. She simply leans in, and the set moves with her. Later, as he leaves, you watch him breathe deeply one last time at the threshold. He won't remember the conversation. He'll remember the way she smelled when she tilted her head. That blend will linger in his memory like a dream. In the perfumery, she laughs softly. Men are easy, she says, not unkindly. Their noses tell on them. You help clean the residue off the copper stills. Everything is logged, what worked, what faded too fast, which blend made his cheeks flush. Even failed batches are catalogued like military drills. This is no longer about vanity. It's about control. You find a corner scroll listing experiments not yet tested. Blend 23B, 4 sleep confessions. Blend 40, to disarm. One smells like a memory you never had. Another like the kind of mistake people write poetry about. A fringe theory Cleopatra toys with, scent creates resonance in the limbic system. That a whiff of something familiar can trigger loyalty, love, or confession. She may not call it neuroscience, but she understands it well enough to use it like a blade. And you're beginning to suspect this isn't even about the Romans anymore. She's preparing for something bigger. Scent as diplomacy, yes. But also scent as seduction. Scent as subterfuge. Maybe even as warfare. As the sun sets, Alexandria glows gold. The queen walks through her garden, brushing petals with her fingertips. She's leaving a trail behind her, intentionally. No step wasted. No note accidental. And somewhere out there, a Roman envoy is dreaming in perfume. The palace buzzes with whispers. Pompey is dead. Not from poison, not from battle, but from betrayal, his head handed over to Julius Caesar like a party favor. And now Caesar himself sails for Alexandria, fuming, grieving, and possibly plotting. You? You're in the queen's dressing chamber, watching her swish across the mosaic floor like a silken storm cloud. The air is thick with rosewater and purpose. Cleopatra is planning something audacious, something involving scented oil, a rolled-up carpet, and the element of surprise. She stands before a bronze mirror, bare-shouldered, eyes sharp as obsidian. She reaches for a vial labeled in Demotic script, her personal blend, kept under lock and sandalwood key. The scent curls into the air as she dabs it behind her ears. Crushed rose, cinnamon bark, and blue lotus, steeped for months in warmed almond oil. Soft, yes, but commanding. Seductive. Unforgettable. It's the same perfume she wore the night she outwitted her brother's advisors. The same scent she wore when she silenced dissent in the palace halls without raising her voice. This isn't decoration, it's armor. You trail her down a narrow passage lit by torchlight. A servant helps her into a tightly wound rug, and in she goes, swallowed by fabric and mystery. Moments later, you're watching the scroll-like bundle carried through a secret entrance to Caesar's quarters. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra actually emerged from a rug or a laundry sack. What matters is the performance. And the perfume. That moment wasn't just political, it was olfactory theater. Inside, Caesar paces, jaw clenched, still mourning Pompey. The room smells like iron and seawater until the rug hits the floor. Unfurls. And Cleopatra appears like some myth-wrapped goddess. He stops breathing. And then he inhales. The scent hits him first, jasmine and spice, familiarity and temptation. It's not overwhelming. It's designed. Softened by myrrh. Stabilized by orris root. His expression melts from wariness to something closer to awe. She hasn't spoken a word, but the air does the talking. And you? You're just outside, heart thudding, because you know what's at stake. This isn't just flirtation, it's a last-ditch alliance, a chemical chess move. Cleopatra knows Caesar isn't here for love. He's here for leverage, for a foothold in Egypt. But he also knows scent. He grew up in the marketplaces of Sabura, where myrrh and civet coiled through the alleys. This perfume reminds him of something: home, hunger, ambition. Whatever it is, it works. He agrees to stay. To mediate between Cleopatra and her brother, Ptolemy XIII. To camp in Alexandria until things settle. But his soldiers complain of strange dreams, of feeling too comfortable, too bewitched. You'd recognize the reason. The queen's halls are suffused with her fragrance now. Not heavily, just enough to follow him, gently, from room to room. His food is cooked in cinnamon. His bedclothes washed in lotus. His quills dusted with orris. A quirky footnote from a palace scribe mentions Caesar sniffing his own toga repeatedly, trying to isolate the source of the sweetness he couldn't quite place. He couldn't know, it was her. Still on him. Still working. There's tension in the air, Rome and Egypt poised like dueling serpents, but under it all is this scent, soft and inescapable. Even the scrolls Caesar sends back to Rome now smell faintly of Cleopatra's oils. The Senate mocks him. Perfumed and conquered, they say. But he stays. And you? You're beginning to understand just how dangerously effective this perfume really is. Not because it seduces, it lingers. Not because it charms, it commands. Caesar isn't falling for a pretty face. He's inhaling an idea that Egypt, in all its decadence and fragrance and fire, is something worth fighting for. Cleopatra knew he'd never forget her. She just made sure he couldn't forget her smell either. You're back in the palace, hiding behind an opulent screen carved with lotus flowers, and the air is thick with sandalwood and possibility. A scribe lays parchment before Cleopatra, and she unrolls it with a flick. This isn't statecraft. This is something more intimate. She dips her reed pen into a pot of ink scented with crushed sandalwood, violet, and a trace of honey. Yes, even her writing smells like her. You're watching Cleopatra compose a letter, but not just any letter. This one is meant for Rome. And the scent rising off the page isn't perfume, it's punctuation. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra intentionally perfumed her letters, but evidence suggests she knew paper wasn't just for words. It was for memory. Scented scrolls weren't uncommon in Egypt, but hers were signature. You could smell one and know who it came from before untying the ribbon. Tonight's letter is for Caesar, and it's laced with more than charm. The ink recipe was ground fresh, aloe, black myrrh, violet extract, all boiled into a musky writing fluid. She knows he'll notice. Not just the words, but the smell on his fingers long after the scroll is read. You lean in to read, a mix of politics and poetry. She thanks him for his continued support, offers trade route secrets, and, just subtly, mentions the texture of the linen she wears when she writes. Bold move. One fringe theory suggests Cleopatra's letters were intentionally folded to trap scent. Open them wrong, and the aroma dissipated. Open them right, and you were caught in a cloud of her making. A primitive perfume trap. Brilliant. But this is more than flotation. Another scroll sits beside her, addressed to a senator you've never heard of. It smells different. Sharper. Basil and ink. Less seduction, more threat. She's playing a long game. Caesar isn't her only audience. Her perfume is moving through diplomatic channels now, clinging to pages, robes, fingers. By the time a message reaches Rome, it carries more than politics, it carries her. One servant mentions an intercepted scroll. Rome's censors opened it and argued for hours. Not over content, but over scent. Was it innocent? Or a kind of psychological warfare? One senator reportedly accused Cleopatra of bewitching men with ambrosial inks. Others wanted to bottle it. And sell it. You follow a courier as he leaves the palace, scrolls bundled in silk, the aroma already lifting into the air. It's not long before rumors spread. Caesar keeps Cleopatra's letters in his personal quarters. Sometimes rereads them before war meetings. They say the scent helps him think. Whether true or not, you know what Cleopatra knows. That smell is memory's first hook. And with each letter, each whiff of her signature ink, she makes herself unforgettable. Later, in her perfumery, you find a pot of unused ink, thicker than the others, darker, almost resinous. She calls it Nightingale's Wing. No one knows the full recipe. A whisper says it includes crushed pearl and powdered musk. For very special correspondences. The palace is alive with scent, floors scrubbed with rose water, curtains steamed with myrrh. Even the coins passed to foreign traders smell faintly of the queen. One scribe swears he dreamed of her voice after inhaling the seal on a message she'd sent. It was like she whispered into my nose, he says, blinking slowly. You can't help but smirk. That night, you watch Cleopatra light incense beneath her writing table. A low cloud of smoke coils upward as she seals another scroll, pressing her ring into warm wax. She doesn't check the wording, she knows the scent will speak louder than anything written. Outside, Alexandria simmers. Caesar's legions are building, and tensions rise. But here, in this room, Cleopatra fights with words dipped in fragrance. She's not just reaching Caesar. She's haunting the very air of Rome. The Nile is quiet tonight, almost suspiciously so. You crouch in the shadow of a limestone pillar, watching a courier row silently across the inky black water. He carries no torch. Only a slim, cloth-wrapped parcel. You already know what's inside. It's not a dagger. Not gold. Not grain. It's perfume. Specifically, a tiny alabaster vial with a cracked seal and a smell that could undo a man's career. You've watched it mix yourself, narrowly, benzoin, and a secret resin from the Levant that Cleopatra swears activates memory in men like wine does truth. This is how she spreads her reach. Not by soldiers, but by scent-coated agents. They call them the scented. You meet one under a palm tree near the river bend. He wears a simple linen tunic but moves like a man who knows every trap in the palace. Around his neck, a leather pouch, filled with vials so small they could hide behind a coin. His job? Deliver the queen's perfumes, not for pleasure, but for provocation. Certain blends are signals. Others are keys. One smells faintly like violet in decay. It's only uncorked when a message needs to be burned after reading. You follow him to the grain docks, where another agent waits, a woman in merchant's robes. She reaches into her sleeve and pulls out a parchment that smells of cedar and sweat. She waves it once in front of a sailor, who immediately nods and changes course. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's spy network used scents as literal communication or simply as identifiers. But you're watching it happen. The vial is the message. The scent is the password. And you? You're now part of it. Back at the palace, the perfumery is operating like a command center. Maps lie open, not marked with arrows or cities, but with dabs of scent. Frankincense over Syria. Cardamom in Cyprus. Patchouli across Crete. Each one a marker for what's been sent, what's been seen, and what's been answered. Cleopatra walks among them like a general inspecting her troops. You notice a scroll addressed to a Roman general. Smells like citrus and panic. She grins. It will arrive before his mistress, she says. He'll open it in front of her. Then we'll see where his loyalty lies. A French theory suggests Cleopatra created false blend trails, vials meant to mimic her signature scent but embedded with alternate meanings. Some even made it to rival queens. One such rival in Anatolia reportedly accused her husband of dreaming of Cleopatra after receiving an accidental shipment of rose and amber. It's espionage, but it smells great. Later that night, you find yourself trailing a young servant down a narrow alley behind the palace. He's carrying a vial in a velvet pouch, clutching it like a sacred relic. At the corner, a Roman officer steps from the shadows. They trade no words. Only the vial. The Roman pops the seal. Inhales. A long silence. Then he nods once and vanishes into the dark. The servant walks back smiling, like a man who just flipped a chessboard over and got away with it. Back at the Nile, the courier returns, empty-handed now. But he smells different. He smells like success. Or maybe just vetiver and victory. You lean against a column, trying to understand how a liquid no larger than a thimble could move borders and bend knees. Cleopatra knows. She's built a network not on whispers, but on whiffs. And as the scent of jasmine rises from the palace once again, you realize this war is already underway. And no one's ready for it. The docks at Alexandria smell like ambition and old fish. You edge through crates of grain and bolts of linen, ducking behind a stack of amphorae leaking sticky resin. Something's different today. The air is sharp with bergamot and something floral, but not the good kind. Synthetic. Imitation. You're in the middle of a black market. Cleopatra's perfume, the perfume, is being copied. You spot the seller, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers and a suspiciously confident grin. He waves a vial at a Roman merchant. Direct from the queen's own house, he claims. Same blend she wore when Caesar forgot he had a senate. A bold lie. But the scent? Close enough to fool the untrained nose. You trail him through the back alleys, where perfume makers operate from shadowy stalls. They're not just selling knockoffs, they're deconstructing the queen's chemistry, trying to reverse engineer her power. One woman sells a version she calls Cleopatra's Last Kiss. It smells, not terrible, but also not royal. Kind of like if someone bottled regret with a dash of overripe plum. This is a problem. Cleopatra's influence is built on being singular, unmistakable. Now, her scent is spreading into places she hasn't touched. You hear of women in Phoenicia wearing it to seduce soldiers. Roman mistresses claiming they know her secret. One copycat formula contains goat tallow and gardenia. Historically inaccurate and olfactorily tragic. Back at the palace, the queen isn't amused. If everyone smells like me, she says, then no one remembers me. She summons her perfumers and locks down her lab. Guards are posted. Ingredients are rationed. Even her private stores are inventoried. You get the sense she's preparing for something more than security. She's preparing for war. She orders a new blend developed, something only she can wear. Something with a base so rare, no one can duplicate it. You watch as her chief perfumer unpacks a lump of deep black resin, wrapped in a scrap of ancient bark. It smells like earth, thunder, and the end of an empire. You're not even sure it's legal. There's talk that spies have infiltrated the scent rooms. That a Roman informant stole one of the older formulas and tried to peddle it in Antioch. He was last seen sniffing his own robes like a man haunted by a memory he couldn't place. A quirky rumor floats through the market that Cleopatra once booby-trapped a false perfume recipe. Anyone who followed the formula to the letter produced a scent so foul it caused nausea for days. Whether true or not, you spot a perfume seller vomiting behind a cart of wilted lotus. You sneak into one of the smuggler's warehouses, the scent of desperation clinging to the walls. Jars are poorly sealed, scrolls smeared with oil, formulas rewritten and simplified, idiot-proofed for mass distribution. You recognize none of the reverence you've seen in Cleopatra's lab. This is factory fraud. You knock over a vial labeled Cleopatra Originale, and it shatters with a hollow note. Inside? Almond oil and something that might be donkey grease. You step back quickly. But the danger isn't just to Cleopatra's image, it's to her control. Every fake bottle diminishes the aura she's worked years to build. Rome doesn't need her permission anymore. Just her formula. And they're getting close. Historians still argue whether this scent smuggling was driven by politics or pure greed. But you know better. The right scent in the wrong hands? That's power misplaced. Cleopatra commissions a new security protocol. Every royal vial now bears a distinct mark, etched into the glass with a stylus dipped in blue malachite ink. You see her test one by breathing across it. The mark changes color in the heat. Ingenious. Possibly magical. Possibly just chemistry. She also starts spreading counterfeits of her own, intentionally flawed imitations released into the black market to discredit the fakes. One smells like her old blend, but decays into something bitter after 15 minutes. Another starts sweet but finishes with a punch of burnt cedar and betrayal. The message is clear, only the queen smells like the queen. You leave the dockside, clothes clinging with scents you didn't ask for. Somewhere behind you, a buyer opens a fake vial and frowns. Meanwhile, up at the palace, the real Cleopatra leans back in her chair, the true blend whispering around her like a crown of smoke. You catch it, just barely. And you understand the difference. Rome starts to sniff trouble, and not the metaphorical kind. Word spreads fast through the curia, the scent of Cleopatra has turned up again. Not in Egypt, not on an ambassador's robe, but in the Senate. You're tucked beneath a shadowed colonnade in the Forum, watching as two Roman senators pause mid-conversation. One lifts his sleeve to his nose, frowns, and mutters something in Latin that roughly translates to, "She's here, isn't she?" He doesn't mean physically. He means olfactorily. The scent drifts through the marble corridors like a rumor in silk gloves, jasmine, black myrrh, and that warm pulse of Egyptian almond oil. Cleopatra hasn't set foot in Rome since Caesar left Egypt, yet somehow, her presence is unmistakable. On a scroll, on a scarf, on the neck of a general's wife. The implications? Problematic. Rome prizes stoicism and grit, not exotic oils and imported indulgence. But Cleopatra's fragrance has become a political specter. Senators argue over its origin, its reach, its purpose. One accuses Caesar of being bewitched. Another demands an investigation into the foreign manipulation of state fragrance. The merchant class isn't helping. A Roman perfumer, clearly out of his depth, claims to have replicated the queen's essence using Tuscan herbs and a splash of goat milk. It's not even close. Still, women buy it. Men claim they smell it in their sleep. You spot a patrician wife dabbing her temples with a cotton ball steeped in Cleopatra oil. The problem is, she's not alone. At least a dozen members of the Senate now wear subtle versions of her scent. Some out of curiosity, some for status, and some, maybe, because they miss her. Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra hears of this and smiles without showing her teeth. Let them pretend, she says, so long as they remember who I am. Her advisors are less amused. They warn that the Senate has gone too far, that it's becoming a target. Rome doesn't like what it can't control. And they can't bottle her. One quirky account suggests a Roman priest blamed an incense mixture in a temple for hallucinations during a ceremony. He claimed the perfume used had the effect of rendering truth flexible. The mixture? A stolen blend from Cleopatra's archives. Caesar, meanwhile, walks a tightrope. He hosts Cleopatra in a lavish villa, keeps her close enough for comfort, yet far enough to pacify the Senate. She dines with him under violet-draped pergolas, her perfume always lingering in the air even when she says nothing at all. He insists she's not a political influence. She just smells like one. Historians still argue whether Caesar used Cleopatra's perfume intentionally to soften political adversaries, or whether he simply couldn't help himself. The answer likely lies somewhere between strategy and sentiment. You sneak into a meeting chamber one morning to find it still clouded with scent. A senator coughs and mutters, "We're being governed by a cloud." His neighbor nods, sniffs his sleeve, and doesn't seem all that upset about it. The Senate grows paranoid. They commission their own perfumers to create a counterscent, bland, local, aggressively Roman. The result smells like olives, cold marble, and sour wine. It is, frankly, awful. Worse yet, they launch investigations into imports from Alexandria. Traders are searched. Vials broken. Anything with a whiff of cardamom or myrrh is confiscated. One unfortunate diplomat has his luggage burned after a senator swears he caught the scent of royal manipulation. You can feel it, the tipping point. Cleopatra's perfume has escaped her body, her scrolls, even her spies. It's a ghost now, haunting Rome, turning allies into addicts and enemies into obsessives. You return to Alexandria to find the queen in her bath, water steaming with rose oil and powdered pearl. She opens one eye. "They've banned me?" she asks, half laughing. You nod. "Then they've already lost," she replies, sinking beneath the surface like a woman with nothing to fear. And you believe her. Because when a scent can make its way into the very place that tried to erase her, the war's already begun. You're aboard a floating palace. No, really, that's what it is. A barge gilded in gold, its sails dyed deep purple, its deck strewn with rose petals so thick they make a muffled path beneath your feet. And the smell? Let's just say if decadence had a scent, this would be it. Mark Antony is on the shore. He's trying to look unimpressed, but you can see the shift in his shoulders as the aroma hits him. The breeze off the Nile carries notes of cinnamon, honey, musk, and a bright flick of citrus that teases rather than announces. Cleopatra's scent strikes first, long before her voice or her gaze. You're standing near the helm as she steps into view. Her hair is coiled high, her gown glows like hammered gold, and she's perfumed in layers so intricately balanced it's practically illegal. You get hit with sweet frankincense, then something darker, richer, probably ambergris. You've smelled this before. In the lab. Labeled only, for conquest. Antony doesn't stand a chance. He breathes deep, like a man starved for something he doesn't understand. The scent softens him immediately, his stance loosens, his expression shifts. He smiles like a boy remembering his first crush. You catch him adjusting his toga and mentally scrapping whatever speech he had prepared. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra loved Mark Antony or merely needed him. But there's no debate about the impact of their first meeting. Plutarch says she arrived like Aphrodite reborn. What he doesn't say is that Aphrodite probably reeked of luxury, secrets, and slow-burning seduction. Antony boards the barge. You stay close enough to hear their small talk but mostly watch the dance of scent in the air. Cleopatra leans close to pour him wine. The motion fans her perfume, and his hand tightens on the cup. She says something innocuous, something about the Nile's flooding schedule, and he laughs too hard. She's already won. Later, they recline beneath a canopy. A servant fans the air with perfumed feathers, goose down dipped in saffron oil. Antony keeps touching his beard like it'll help him think straight. It won't. Cleopatra's perfume wasn't just applied. It was planned. Every note timed like a drumbeat. First the top, citrusy and clean. Then the middle, warm, welcoming. And finally the base, which doesn't hit until hours later. That's when it wraps around your memory and nestles in deep, like a whisper you can't unhear. A fringe theory claims she had a perfume specifically designed to affect Antony's temper, a blend that mellowed his fire and heightened his romanticism. Whether it was chemistry or coincidence, it worked. He turned his warships around. Stayed longer than planned. The war could wait. The scent couldn't. You follow them through Alexandria over the next weeks, feasts, hunts, late-night games of dice. Through it all, Cleopatra's scent never falters. Different every day, yet unmistakably hers. One evening, she smells like spiced wine and apple blossom. The next, like some warm skin after rain. Always enticing. Never predictable. Roman dignitaries visiting Antony start noticing. One jokes that he's become a perfumed shadow of himself. Another, not joking, warns that Egypt is corrupting him. That the queen's oils might be more dangerous than her armies. You watch a moment in the garden when Antony, drunk on whatever she's wearing that night, stares at her like she holds the secret to every pleasure he's ever denied himself. She laughs, brushes her hair back, and you see him visibly fight the urge to chase that scent wherever it goes. She doesn't have to ask for loyalty. He gives it freely. Because Cleopatra understands what most leaders forget, loyalty isn't just won with blood or coin. It's embedded in memory. And memory is scent's favorite playground. One night, as Antony drifts off beside her, you catch her placing a dab of oil at his pulse point. Just enough to stay with him in dreams. He murmurs her name, half asleep, half surrendered. You slip away, past the quiet guards and the faint trail of rose and musk left in Cleopatra's wake. The air is thick with conquest. But no swords have been drawn. Not yet. The streets of Alexandria smell like propaganda. You wander through the agora, where stallholders hawk baskets of olives, embroidered linen, and, oddly enough, small vials of scented oil labeled the breath of Isis. Cleopatra's doing. Again. But this isn't perfume for pleasure. This is messaging, bottled and sold. The queen's scent has become more than seduction, it's a symbol. A political perfume. A scented flag. You pass a mural freshly painted with Cleopatra seated beneath a canopy of lotus flowers, Mark Antony at her feet, golden smoke curling around them both. Nearby, vendors burn incense in her honor, actual incense, sourced from her perfumery, and sanctioned by the palace. The aroma? Smooth spikenard with a base of frankincense and a top note of lemon blossom. Calming. Reverent. But also, persuasive. You follow a group of Alexandrian citizens into a public hall. It's crowded, but the air smells curated. The perfume has been piped in, like an invisible chorus. Cleopatra's latest blend, sweet, rich, but grounded, fills every breath. And it's working. People nod more. Speak warmly. Talk of the queen as if she's divine. And that's the point. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra leaned more into her Ptolemaic Greek heritage or embraced the image of the Egyptian goddess. But through scent, she didn't have to choose. She became a blend of both, part Aphrodite, part Isis. Not a queen. The queen. You slip behind the stage, where a young actor is adjusting his costume. He carries a flask labeled Tears of R.A. You ask what it is. He shrugs. Makes the crowd feel like they've known her forever. He's not wrong. It's the olfactory equivalent of nostalgia, hope, and maternal command all swirled into one. Even the temples have joined in. Priests burn oils supplied by the palace during rites once reserved for traditional deities. Cleopatra's scent has crept into worship. She's becoming inseparable from the gods. In the palace, you see how calculated it all is. Every ambassador is greeted with a different scent depending on their origin. One from Parthia? He gets the scent of bitter almond and fig. Leaf, masculine, sharp, not too friendly. A delegate from Athens? She's welcomed with helichrysum and honey, soft and familial. A fringe theory even suggests that Cleopatra had scrolls written by court poets pre-scented and released anonymously into the city, stoking loyalty through smell-wrapped verse. You find one lying on a bench. It reads, "She moves, and the air follows her slash like silk torn from the sun." It smells like cardamom and longing. Meanwhile, Rome is watching. Suspicious. The Senate receives reports that Alexandria isn't just loyal to Cleopatra, they worship her. And this new loyalty isn't built on gold or grain. It's floating on air, invisible and unstoppable. Inside the perfumery, the blend makers work like priests. They wear gloves now. Their recipes are inked in riddles. Cleopatra walks among them, nodding, adjusting, sometimes stopping to crush a petal between her fingers and smell its soul. This, she murmurs once, holding a vial aloft, will be remembered for centuries. And maybe she's right. Because as you walk through the palace garden at night, you hear the distant hum of hymns sung not to Isis or Horus, but to her. Their queen. Their perfumed one. Their memory made flesh. And with every breath, her empire expands. Without lifting a sword, you smell rebellion before you hear it. It starts with a bitter tang in the alleyways near Rome's perfumer districts, charred resin, scorched herbs, and something sharp like anger steeped in alcohol. You trail it through cobbled streets, past bathhouses and bread stalls, until you find the source, a riot outside the house of Aromatica, where a crowd of Roman perfumers shouts, curses, and, of course, burns a bundle of imported Egyptian myrrh in protest. Cleopatra's perfume isn't just a trend now. It's an economic threat. Roman artisans are furious. Their local blends, rose, sage, pine, have been shoved aside for exotic imports. Cleopatra's signature oil has flooded the market, legally or otherwise, and the local tradesmen can't keep up. A new merchant down the Via Sacra boasts, worn by the Queen of the Nile herself, and charges triple the usual rate. Roman noses have turned eastward, and the city's traditional scents now reek of irrelevance. One perfume master, face flushed and hands black with soot, waves a shattered amphora like a weapon. "We taught the world how to scent," he growls, "and now we're being conquered by a woman in a golden wig." Inside his crumbling shop, you see scrolls torn in fury, frantic attempts to copy Cleopatra's base formula. One recipe includes fish oil and vinegar. It's misguided. But it's more than pride. Cleopatra's perfume has become political. If you wear it, you're signaling something dangerous, softness toward Egypt, disloyalty to Roman tradition, maybe even support for Antony. The Senate debates an outright ban. Meanwhile, the women of the patrician class spritz it behind closed doors and say nothing. Historians still argue whether this perfume panic was orchestrated by Cleopatra herself. But you've seen her work. She doesn't just seduce men. She destabilizes industries. And Rome is reeling. Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra is unbothered. Her latest creation is underway, thicker, darker, more complex. She calls it Descent of the Falcon, and it smells like fire, fig, sandalwood, and something elusive. Something that smells like a dare. One of her advisors reads her the latest report from Rome. Perfumers threaten boycott. Say Egyptian imports erode Roman values. Cleopatra just lifts her wrist, inhales, and says, "Then let them smell their own decline." You wander through her private garden, where ingredients grow in rows more precise than military formations. Vetiver, marjoram, acacia blossoms, every petal with a purpose. Even the bees here seem to hover with strategy. She's begun to blend scent and rumor. A fringe tale suggests she slipped her formula to one senator's wife just to stoke marital discord. The woman wore it to a state dinner. The man, hypnotized, forgot his own name midway through a speech. You watch the ripples flow outward. Rome's elite begin requesting neutral scents, lavender, cedar, unscented oils. It's a quiet rebellion against the rebellion. But Cleopatra isn't backing down. She releases a new vial named Roma's Regret. It sells out in minutes. Meanwhile, Antony, her loyal general, her partner in politics and passion, sends word from the Eastern Front. His messages now carry her scent. And every time a courier arrives in the forum reeking of musk and myrrh, Rome remembers who he's loyal to. And who he isn't. Tensions rise. You witness a secret Senate meeting where scrolls are passed with cloths tied around them to muffle the perfume. One senator demands that any correspondence from Alexandria be copied, scent neutralized, and burned. "We don't breathe Egyptian," he declares. But you watch him linger just a moment too long before handing over the letter. That's the power. Not that they love it. That they can't forget it. Back in the Queen's lab, you hold a fresh vial. The label is smudged, but you recognize the scent immediately. Confidence, ruin, and legacy. Cleopatra leans close and murmurs, "They think they hate me. But they'll never stop breathing me." And somewhere in Rome, a bottle breaks. A senator's wife weeps. And a perfumer lights another flame, swearing he'll burn the Nile from the nostrils of the empire. Good luck with that. You wake to shouting. Not Alexandria's usual clamor of bartering voices or drunken songs from the harbor, but a sharp, urgent cry slicing through the courtyard like a whip. You follow it, sandals slapping against some warm tile, through the inner sanctum of the palace and out into the temple district, where something has gone very, very wrong. The Temple of Mendes has been raided. You arrive to see smoke rising from the eastern wing, thin and bitter, mingled with the sour tang of scorched herbs. The scent is familiar, labdanum and cedar burned too quickly, ruined under flame. Inside, the sacred perfumery, the queen's oldest, most secret store of formulas, is a wreck. Shelves overturned. Papyrus scrolls shredded. Glass vials shattered like bone. The air is thick with the ghosts of vanished perfumes. And the priests? Devastated. These weren't just worship spaces, they were scent vaults, repositories of thousands of years of olfactory knowledge, guarded more fiercely than any tomb. One elder clutches a jar still intact, sobbing over its contents. She trusted us, he whispers. She gave us the recipe. You glance inside. The oil is pale gold, glinting like sunlight caught in liquid. Only one formula was taken. You don't need to ask which. The Queen's blend. The blend. The original, ancient concoction said to evoke loyalty, lust, and loss all at once. The one Cleopatra only wore on moments that mattered, peace treaties, royal seductions, near deaths. She's already on her way, robes swirling behind her like storm clouds, her expression locked between fury and calculation. When she arrives, the air seems to tighten around her. Even amid the smoke and ash, she carries her scent like armor. Historians still argue whether the raid was Roman sabotage or internal betrayal. The queen suspects both. No thief comes without a door being left open, she mutters. Then, quieter, but I'll seal it with fire next time. In the aftermath, she orders every known recipe rewritten, renamed, and stored separately across the city. One to a garden vault. One inside the paw of a sphinx. One, this is odd, hidden beneath the heel of a marble statue of Isis, sealed with beeswax and fig pulp. You assist in the cleanup, stepping over pools of amber oil and broken clay. The floor smells like failure and fury. A scroll fragment sticks to your sandal. On it, part of a formula, 2 drops galbanum, 1 crushed iris root. Then it's snatched away by a wind that smells of rose and warning. In secret, Cleopatra meets with her perfumers. One, younger and nervous, says he can replicate the stolen blend. No, she says. If it's stolen, it's no longer mine. We make something better. That night, they start from scratch. New ratios. New ingredients. They test civet against costus, pine against benzoin. You watch her sniff each vial like she's judging old lovers. Most she rejects. One she considers. One she keeps. By dawn, she has a new scent. Stronger. Stranger. It doesn't just linger, it warns. You smell it and think of thunder. Of the moment before a tide pulls you under. She wears it the next morning like a promise carved into skin. A fringe rumor whispers that Cleopatra sent a fake recipe to the temple weeks earlier, knowing betrayal was near. The raiders may have fled with a useless blend, designed to smell exquisite for 20 minutes, then sour into something unbearable. You wish you could believe it, but part of you knows what was lost was real. And Rome? They've noticed the absence. Word travels. That a sacred site was desecrated. That the queen's famed formula is missing. They celebrate in private, but their victory is incomplete. They may have stolen her scent, but not her power to reinvent it. Back in her perfumery, Cleopatra watches her new blends steep beneath warm coals. She doesn't speak. She just breathes it in. Slowly. Deliberately. Then she looks at you and says, let them use what they stole. Let them wear it to their own undoing. And somehow, you believe her. You unroll the scroll carefully. It's warm from being tucked beneath Cleopatra's arm, the parchment still faintly scented with cedar and something bitter, mandrake root, maybe. Not unusual at first glance, a tangle of symbols, formulae, and ratios, inked in that tight, graceful script her perfumers favor. But your instincts say otherwise. This isn't just a perfume recipe. It's a message. It begins with expected ingredients, blue lotus, crushed myrrh, olive oil. Then it shifts, falcon feather ash, fermented fig sap, and a dash of powdered turquoise. Not typical perfume fare. That's what gives it away. Hidden between the chemical instructions are phrases no true perfumer would need. Out under the waning moon, one line reads. Another, more curious, may only be worn by blood and blood again. You scan the symbols. It's encoded. Part alchemical, part mythological, part political. Cleopatra didn't just write a scent recipe, she cloaked a secret plan in the language of fragrance. Historians still argue whether this scroll was ever meant to be deciphered or whether it was designed to mislead. But one theory suggests it was part of her emergency war strategy, a coded instruction on how to identify and rally loyalists through scent alone. You believe it. Every element lines up with a known faction, a trusted ally, a remembered city. Back in the perfumery, Cleopatra pores over copies of the scroll, testing one element at a time. She's quiet, methodical, unnerving in her calm. She marks one symbol with a dot of coal, muttering, "This wasn't about perfume. This was a map." And sure enough, laid over Alexandria's palace blueprint, the scroll's symbols align perfectly with secret tunnels, courtyards, and buried chambers. The recipe was a fallback plan. A fail-safe. You watch as her perfumers reconstruct the blend described, what they can, anyway. It's not wearable. Not really. The result smells metallic, like water just before a lightning storm, with a sharp herbal edge that makes your eyes sting. No one could wear it without making people flinch. Which is probably the point. She tests it on linen scrap and hands it to a messenger. "If you must run," she says, "carry this. My allies will know you." The messenger nods and disappears into the city like smoke. You turn back to the scroll. Another line leaps out, "When the white flower dies, burn everything." You don't ask what that means. The scroll vanishes soon after, stashed away in the palace's hollow wall, behind a false panel marked with the symbol for breath. You helped seal it. The wall still smells faintly of sandalwood and sweat. The queen doesn't speak of it again. A few days later, word comes from the coast. A Roman courier was intercepted with a scroll bearing her symbol and scent, but altered. Subtle changes in ink. The perfume? Off. Barely. The kind of mistake only someone close would notice. A forgery. Cleopatra hears the news and simply says, "Let them guess." They always guess wrong. A fringe theory circulates in Alexandria that the real scroll was never a recipe at all, but a slow-acting formula of influence. That anyone carrying the blend, even briefly, would unknowingly inhale trace elements that made them compliant. You doubt the science, but the possibility is unnerving. That night, the queen orders all old recipes burned. Every scroll, even the ones she loved. The perfumers protest. She silences them with a look. "We don't go backward," she says, voice low. "We set the future." The flames rise in the courtyard brazier, scrolls curling inward as fragrant smoke coils toward the stars. You watch her toss the last vial of the decoded blend into the fire. It shatters with a hiss, and the scent that follows is unlike anything you've smelled, final, bitter, strangely exhilarating. Like closure laced with cloves. The queen doesn't flinch. She watches the fire until it dies, then turns away without a word. Behind her, the wind shifts. And just like that, the air belongs to her again. You're tucked in the belly of a Roman trireme, and it smells like sweat, salt, and desperation. Around you, broken crates, leaking amphorae, and tucked carefully in the arms of a centurion, a velvet-lined case containing 6 alabaster vials. Stolen. Swiped from Alexandria's perfumery during a midnight raid in Rhodes, where Cleopatra's agents had just missed intercepting the shipment. And now it's on its way to Rome. The men aboard the ship don't understand what they're carrying. They joke about the queen's potions, shaking the box like it's full of sweet wine. One uncorks a vial, an older blend, heavy with saffron and musk, and immediately flinches. "Smells like a funeral wrapped in roses," he mutters. But he doesn't throw it away. He pockets it. Historians still argue whether the Rhodes heist was planned by Roman generals or by private traders hoping to profit from Cleopatra's waning secrecy. What's clear is that someone high up wanted a sample of her power. The scent. The secret. The myth bottled in oil. You watch as another man dabs a bit on his neck, laughing. Within the hour, he's quieter, distracted, rubbing his collar and whispering nonsense about Egypt's moonlight. The scent has sunk its claws. The ship groans as it cuts through rough waters. The box shifts. You keep close. You know what Cleopatra warned, it's not just perfume. It's presence. The moment her scent arrives in Rome, it begins working, even without her there. And that's the real threat. But the queen wasn't idle when the vials vanished. She sent a false trail behind them. Another ship, faster, carrying look-alike bottles, booby-trapped with a reverse blend. Similar in the first whiff, but breaking down within minutes into something sour and suspicious. A deterrent. A lesson. You remember her laughing as she dipped the last fake into a paste made from fermented juniper and expired civet. "Let them wear this to the Senate," she said, "and see who still takes them seriously." You're not sure which set of vials you're sitting near now, the originals or the decoys. But the one you opened earlier? It still smells right. Which means if it makes it to Rome, Cleopatra's signature scent will drift through villas, parties, temples. Not just remembered, but replicated. That's the real theft. Suddenly, shouting on deck. The lookout has spotted sails, Egyptian. Fast ones. Cleopatra's black and gold couriers. You scramble as soldiers rush upward. The captain yells orders, but panic has already crept into the men's bones. The scent? It's still lingering. They know it. They don't know what it does, but it unnerves them. You hear a clash. A scream. The Egyptian ship rams the side of the trireme, and chaos breaks loose. Smoke, arrows, the sharp clang of metal. In the confusion, the box is knocked overboard, vials tumbling into the sea. You dive after it instinctively, water shocking your lungs, the scent dispersing around you like memory fleeing the mind. Only one vial remains unbroken, its wax seal miraculously intact. You clutch it as you surface, gasping, pulled onto the Egyptian deck. The courier doesn't ask. He knows. He wraps the vial in silk and slips it into a lead-lined box. Not for use, he says grimly. Not anymore. Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra listens to the tale in silence. When you offer the vial, she doesn't take it. Let it rest, she says. Some things, once stolen, lose their purity. It was made for me, and now it's been handled by those without poetry. She's already planning a new scent. This one won't travel well. It's designed to fall apart outside Alexandria's heat, to sour in colder air, to betray any thief. She calls it Mother of Dust. It smells like sun-baked stone, wild fig, and old regret. But she hasn't forgotten the Rhodes attempt. That name will linger in her memory like a stain. She orders an envoy to visit the island, not with war, but with a gift. A box of perfume. Inside? The bad blend. Marked with a simple phrase, for the next time you're tempted. The queen doesn't rage. She redirects. And as you walk through her perfumery that night, where herbs still hang like prayer beads and pots bubble with ambition, you realize something. Every vial, every formula, every scent she's ever worn is both a message and a trap. The Romans may try again. They may even succeed. But they'll never smell victory. You're standing in a sun-drenched courtyard where Cleopatra's son, Caesar Ion, balances a brass bowl of perfume oil in one hand and a reed stylus in the other. He's not more than 10, maybe 11, but already his brow furrows like a man burdened with legacy. His tutors speak softly around him, discussing blend ratios and extraction methods, but Cleopatra doesn't just want her son to mix scents, she wants him to understand them. This is her next project, passing down power, not just through blood, but through aroma. She watches him as he leans close to the bowl, sniffing with genuine curiosity, then scribbles a note in Greek on the parchment beside him. You glance over his shoulder. Too much galbanum. Makes it smell like betrayal. You stifle a laugh. The kid's learning fast. Cleopatra isn't raising a child. She's sculpting a ruler who will understand that influence can be carried in the air. She believes Caesar Ion will one day rule, not just Egypt, but perhaps even Rome. And when he does, she wants him to walk into a room and make people remember her with every breath. She's begun training him in scent-coded diplomacy. Each week, she tests him. A bowl of perfume is placed in front of him and he must tell its message. Is this scent designed for seduction or subversion? Is it an invitation or a warning? He never gets it wrong twice. You can't help but wonder what kind of ruler a boy becomes when his earliest lessons are taught by fragrance. One blend they work on together is dubbed Air of the Sun. It carries notes of saffron, sweet orange, and a base of resinous cedarwood, a scent Cleopatra claims is equal parts invitation and declaration. It's meant for Caesarion's first diplomatic trip. He sniffs it and says, "It smells like I'm already winning." His mother nods. Historians still debate whether Cleopatra truly believed her son could unite Egypt and Rome, or if she simply hoped perfume might do what politics could not. But what's undeniable is how carefully she planned for the moment when she wouldn't be there. One afternoon, she shows him a sealed case of her private vials, each one labeled not with names, but with intentions. One says "More me correctly." Another, "When in Rome, wear this." She tells him not to open them until he needs to. He promises. He probably won't wait. Meanwhile, the perfumery staff have started calling him the Little Scented One. It was meant as a joke at first, but he wears it proudly. Sometimes he walks through the corridors trailing a blend of his own design, papyrus, lemon peel, and the faintest hint of sandalwood. People begin to notice. One general mentions how Caesar Ion smelled oddly commanding during a parade. A courtier claims his daughter dreamed of the boy king after passing him in the garden. The whispers begin. Cleopatra's influence isn't fading. It's simply changing carriers. A fringe rumor. dismissed by scholars, suggests that Cleopatra had a special blend developed that only bonded with her son's skin chemistry. On others, it turned sour. On Caesar Ion, it bloomed. You believe it. You smelled it yourself when you walked past, a scent that didn't just linger, but claimed the space. She knows Rome watches him with suspicion. They call him the Queen's mistake, the boy who smells of secrets and seduction, the scent of Egypt's future. But Cleopatra leans into that perception. She makes sure Caesar Ion is present when ambassadors arrive. That they notice him. That they smell him. One day, you catch her whispering to him, "Power is not always seen. Sometimes it's remembered on someone's skin." He nods like he's heard it before. He probably has, 100 times. That night, you find Caesar Ion asleep in the garden, tucked beneath a fig tree. One of his vials has fallen from his sash, the stopper slightly ajar. You pick it up and breathe it in, cinnamon, papyrus smoke, and that elusive warmth Cleopatra favors. For a moment, you swear you can smell both of them at once. The Queen's empire isn't built on land anymore. It's built in memory. In association. In what lingers. And now, it's in him. You find yourself in a tense chamber within Rome's Senate, the air thick not just with debate, but with a peculiar, unsettling aroma. It's faint at first, like crushed herbs warmed by a dying fire, but unmistakable once you catch it, Cleopatra's perfume. The scent seems to weave itself into the heavy marble walls, slipping beneath togas and into nostrils. The Senate has issued a strict embargo against Egyptian imports, especially those bearing her olfactory signature, but it's clear the fragrance has already infiltrated the very heart of Roman power. You watch senators wrinkle their noses in frustration, some coughing, others glaring at one another suspiciously. Wearing Cleopatra's scent is now considered a dangerous act, an unspoken act of defiance or seduction. The Senate debates harsh penalties, even exile, for anyone caught possessing the forbidden fragrance. Yet, despite this, whispers circulate that many senators secretly dab the scent beneath their collars before critical votes, as if it grants a subtle edge, confidence, allure, or perhaps a whispered reminder of Egypt's lingering influence. In the bustling forums, merchants find clever ways to circumvent the embargo, disguising the Queen's perfume under other names or mixing it with local herbs. The Roman perfumers, frustrated and feeling threatened, rally to create their own counterscents, sharp, austere mixtures meant to cleanse the air of Cleopatra's intoxicating influence. These harsh concoctions smell like dry olives, bitter myrtle, and cold stone, a stark contrast to the warm, layered complexity of the Egyptian oils. Yet they fail to erase the subtle power Cleopatra's scent holds. Historians still debate if the Senate's perfume ban was a genuine attempt to protect Roman values or a desperate move to choke off Cleopatra's rising power. But you see it for what it is, scent is a weapon in a battle where no armies march, yet loyalties shift like shadows. The perfume has become a symbol, a silent but potent language spoken in salons, Senate chambers, and shadowed alleyways. Meanwhile, back in Alexandria, Cleopatra smirks when she hears of Rome's embargo. Her perfumery doubles production, crafting secret batches infused with rare resins and spices that degrade quickly outside Egypt's heat, making them near impossible to replicate or transport. She experiments with new blends designed to evoke memory and desire but also confusion and doubt, sowing subtle unrest among Rome's elites. You watch her move through her gardens, inhaling the blossoms and leaves, already plotting the next olfactory maneuver. "If they want to ban me, let them choke on their own fear," she whispers. Because scent doesn't obey borders. It lingers. It conquers. It remembers. The war of noses has begun, and you find yourself caught in the middle, part witness, part pawn, watching as Cleopatra turns fragrance into empire, one breath at a time. The night air hangs heavy with the scent of jasmine and impending chaos as you sneak through the shadowed gardens of the Roman imperial court. Cleopatra's latest aromatic assault is underway, not in the usual salons or diplomatic chambers, but in the heart of Rome itself. You watch from the shadows as servants discreetly scatter small vials of her perfume, diluted but potent, across courtyards, bedrooms, even the emperor's personal chambers. This is no longer just diplomacy, it's sabotage. The scent you smell is unlike anything before, a complex, intoxicating blend of bitter orange peel, smoky frankincense, and a subtle undertone of sharp myrrh that prickles the skin like a whispered threat. It moves through the palace like an invisible army, uniting allies and unraveling enemies in equal measure. Cleopatra's aromatic weapon is in full bloom, seeping into the minds and memories of Rome's elite, making them question their loyalties and desires. You witness a senator waking in the night, inexplicably restless, breathing deep of the scented air that lingers on his pillowcase. Elsewhere, an advisor absent-mindedly rubs the perfume into his temples during a tense council meeting, his words suddenly softer, more conciliatory. Rumors swirl that the emperor himself has become addicted to the scent, his decisions swayed by the invisible tendrils of Cleopatra's presence. Scholars debate whether these effects are psychosomatic or chemical, but no one disputes the growing influence the queen wields through her olfactory craft. The perfumery in Alexandria is alight with activity, its amber-lit rooms humming with urgency. Cleopatra oversees the creation of new formulas designed not only to entice but to manipulate, scents that can induce forgetfulness, courage, or even subtle despair. One vial, labeled Shadow's Embrace, is rumored to carry a blend that makes the wearer seem both alluring and dangerously unpredictable, a perfect metaphor for the queen herself. Meanwhile, her spies carry these blends across the Mediterranean, distributing them like invisible messengers in silk-wrapped packages. Back in Rome, a whispered panic grips the Senate. A once rigid political order is bending beneath the weight of invisible influence. Cleopatra's perfume has become a metaphorical siege engine, breaching walls without a single sword drawn. Roman senators question their own thoughts, wondering which ideas are truly theirs and which are planted by the scent that haunts their skin. You feel the tension build like a storm as Cleopatra's fragrance continues to ripple through the city, reaching deeper into power than any army or fleet ever could. The queen's strategy is clear, to make herself indispensable, unforgettable, and feared, not by force, but by memory and desire. The line between love and war blurs with every breath, and you realize that Cleopatra's perfume has become her most potent weapon, a silent conqueror capable of toppling empires one scent at a time. You clutch the last vial tightly as the sky above Actium burns with fire and smoke, the clash of fleets echoing like thunder in your chest. Cleopatra's final stand is more than a battle of ships, it's a war of wills, a contest of legacies, and somewhere in the midst of this chaos, her perfume lingers like a ghost refusing to fade. This last vial contains the essence she's guarded through every twist and turn, a complex tapestry of night-blooming jasmine, dark amber, crushed myrrh, and a faint whisper of vetiver that clings to your skin like a memory you can't quite place. The scent is fierce, a final declaration of identity and power before everything changes. The air around you hums with tension, the salt and smoke mixing with Cleopatra's signature fragrance to create a surreal haze that wraps around the warriors and sailors alike. As Antony's fleet burns, you feel the weight of history pressing down, the scent acting as both shield and sword in the final hours. Cleopatra moves with a calm that belies the storm, each step calculated, each breath measured. The perfume is her armor now, an invisible force field against the inevitable. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra fled to her tomb with this vial or used it as a weapon to beguile her enemies in her final moments. Some suggest it was meant to be a lasting emblem of defiance, a reminder that even in defeat, she would not be forgotten. You watch as the queen hands the vial to a trusted servant, whispering instructions that hint at escape, subterfuge, and legacy. The servant disappears into the labyrinthine streets of Alexandria, the vial's delicate scent trailing behind like a living thing. You reflect on everything, the lost scrolls, the stolen recipes, the black markets, the embassies scented with secret messages. Cleopatra's perfume was never just a fragrance. It was a language, a weapon, and a lifeline. As the smoke from Actium's fires rises, you feel the scent seep into the very stones of the city, into the memories of those who lived and died for her cause. It is the scent of a queen refusing to vanish. Long after the battle, you find yourself wandering the ruins, the last vial still warm in your hand. You uncork it briefly, letting the rich aroma fill the air, a bittersweet blend of victory and loss. The scent clings to you, a reminder that some empires live on not in land or blood, but in the invisible trails left behind, carried on the wind and in the minds of those who dare to remember. And as you breathe it in, you understand that Cleopatra's greatest conquest wasn't a throne or a kingdom, it was immortality, bottled in perfume and woven into the fabric of history. You step carefully into the modern archaeological dig on the outskirts of ancient Alexandria, the dusty air thick with the scent of earth and history. The faint hint of something floral and resinous, almost like distant myrrh, teases your nostrils as you brush away centuries of sand from a shattered clay jar. It's cracked, its edges jagged, but inside, traces of a dark, sticky substance remain, the remnants of Cleopatra's perfume. This is the final clue, the whisper of a legacy nearly lost to time. Modern chemists eagerly swarm the find, their instruments humming with anticipation, eager to unlock secrets that could rewrite what we know about ancient alchemy and influence. You watch as the experts carefully extract samples, their faces a mixture of reverence and excitement. The chemical fingerprints are extraordinary: rare resins, exotic spices, oils from plants long thought extinct. Some components have only recently been rediscovered in remote corners of Africa and Asia. This isn't just perfume. It's a complex formula that transcends its era, one that suggests Cleopatra's olfactory creations were far more advanced than history ever credited. Historians still debate how much of her scent was myth and how much was science, but the evidence now leans toward the latter. She was a pioneer, a strategist, and perhaps one of the world's earliest neurochemists in disguise. You hear murmurs among the scientists about the possibility of recreating the scent, not just for curiosity, but to understand how it affected emotions, memory, and allegiance. The implications are staggering. What if the same perfume that once nearly ignited a war could be used to heal, to unify, or even to manipulate on a new scale? Ethical questions hang in the air, as dense as the fragrance itself. How much power should anyone wield over the mind through something so subtle, so primal? Outside the dig site, tourists wander the ruins, some unaware of the invisible threads connecting them to Cleopatra's world. Yet, as you breathe in the lingering scent, you realize that every breath you take is steeped in history, carried forward by the molecules that once swirled around a queen who understood that power was not always fought with swords. Sometimes, it was worn. In that moment, you understand why the story of Cleopatra's perfume isn't just a footnote in history, it's a living narrative. One that stretches from the bustling streets of Alexandria to the marble halls of Rome, and now, into the labs and hearts of the modern world. A story of scent and strategy, seduction and survival, memory and myth. And as the sun sets over the Mediterranean, casting long shadows over the ancient stones, you breathe deeply, letting the past settle softly around you. Cleopatra's perfume has endured, whispering her name across millennia, reminding us that sometimes the most powerful battles are fought not with armies, but with the faintest trace of fragrance on the air. The night settles softly around you, like a velvet curtain gently drawn across the stage. The scents we've traced together, the jasmine, the myrrh, the hint of honeyed sandalwood, linger still, fading slowly as if reluctant to leave your senses. Cleopatra's story, with all its twists and shadows, has carried you through bustling courts, secret labs, and ancient battlefields. But now, as your eyelids grow heavy, it's time to let the past settle like dust in the quiet corners of memory. Imagine the soft rustle of linen curtains in a warm, fragrant room where history's whispers mingle with the hum of distant waves. Feel the gentle weight of twilight pressing you into calm, the intricate dance of power and perfume now resting, like a slow exhale. You're wrapped in a scent not just of a queen, but of a world long gone and yet still alive, in stories, in shadows, in the very air you breathe. Take a deep, slow breath. Let the images fade softly, the burning ships of Actium, the secret vials passed in moonlight, the perfumed scrolls that carried more than words. They are safe here, folded gently into the night, waiting for another time, another dream. And as you drift off, remember this: power can be quiet, subtle, and unseen. It can linger in a whisper or a scent, shaping worlds in ways armies never could. Cleopatra's perfume was never just fragrance. It was a story, a legacy, that lives on, carried on the breeze, waiting to be discovered anew. Good night. Sweet dreams.